Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to just progress through here, and let's see if it's big enough for you to see. Okay, so I've titled this presentation My Anxious Mind. It's just an introduction to using free, online, evidence-based self-help strategies to help teenagers manage their anxiety. Now, I'm stressing evidence-based and self-help strategies because if we were to Google anxiety right now, we'd come up with all kinds of things on the internet relating to the topic, and some of them may not be evidence-based. In fact, you'll find people selling all kinds of herbal medicines, all kinds of websites are popping up on this topic because it's 1 in 4 teenagers will at some point have issues with anxiety. Will have symptoms of an anxiety disorder, 1 in 4. So as professionals, we're going to stick to evidence-based self-help strategies. That's what I'm going to speak about today, and I won't deviate from that. So anything you hear from me regarding this topic will be based on with that in mind. Now, if we were face to face right now, I'd have my guitar and I'd ask you, what do you think what do we got here? And in the center of those circles are some guitar chords, G, C, and D in green, and then there's A minor, and then as you move out from the center, there's these other chords. And you discover that it's very easy for me to play those guitar chords in the center. Very easy. But you'd also notice that my voice would be a little weak when I try to sing. Even when I'm talking, you would probably notice that my breathing's off a little bit. So if we were face to face and I'm got my guitar, I'm going to be physiologically affected by this experience. It's going to be, my hands are going to sweat even, okay? And I'll be able to play those G, C, and D chords and the A minor, but as I move out of the comfort zone, there's some chords that are tough for me to play, and it's harder. As I move out of that comfort zone, as I move to the edge, I'm going to struggle. But what we know from research, this hasn't anything to do with anxiety, we know that a lot of learning happens right at the edge, right on the edge of where there's a little bit of, where we're approaching a discomfort. So if we were to stay in the center, C, D, and G, where it's comfortable, we're going to limit our learning. If a student stays at home where it's comfortable, they limit their learning. So we want to broaden out the circle of their comfort zone and help them approach things that they might fear, things that cause them anxiety related to school. We want to help them with that. Okay, so if we were face to face with a guitar, I would be singing you a song, and you'd notice my physiological changes, and you'd get a sense that the goal is to expand the comfort zone of students. Now, I can't show you this video, so I'm going to describe it to you because it's a picture, a video of a girl who's singing the national anthem at an NBA basketball game. And so she's in front of 35,000 people live, and then there's millions watching. So she starts to sing this song, and of course it's a beautiful rendition of the national anthem, but partway through it you can see her falter and freeze. And I mean, it's quite understandable. Anybody could do that, having to sing in front of so many people. But you can actually see her she freezes. And we know from research that when anxiety gets triggered, your body goes into threat mode, like fight, flight, or freeze. And it's very difficult. It can be difficult to get out of that. It hits you physiologically, and you, in this case, she froze. And you'll hear, and what you hear is you hear the people in the audience starting to laugh. And we might say to ourselves, well, I wonder what she's thinking right now. And the truth is, we have no idea what she's thinking. In fact, we don't even know what's going on with her. We have no clue. We just know that she's unable to sing anymore. She's stopped, and she physically looks distressed. So what happens is the coach of one of the teams gets up off the bench, walks all the way down to where she's singing, where she's frozen. He puts his arm on her shoulder and he sings the song with her. And together, they're successful in singing it. She needed someone to help her get through it. And then, of course, she finishes powerfully, and it's a wonderful, everybody cheers. But she was stuck, and she needed someone to come by and help her. Now, that coach had no business to do that. That's not his job. It's not in his job description. No one was expecting it. He didn't arrange for her to sing. He's there focusing on his team, but he saw that the right thing to do was to go and help her. And what I'm suggesting, it took courage for him to do that, and it took courage for that little girl to get up there and say, I'd like to try and sing the song. So as professionals, I'm suggesting that we be as courageous, and when we see a young person stumble and falter, if it has to do with a situation where they're anxious at school, then it's our duty, I believe, to go and help that person. Okay, now I'm going over some foundational things here because I think it's important, so I hope you'll bear with me here. Some of you may have heard of the LAV, L-A-V, listen, acknowledge, validate. This is kind of a standard model of interacting with people. And if we were doing a workshop together, I'd actually lay a rope out on the floor, and I'd have you stand along the rope. And the people on the left, so see the fellow there squatting on the left, we'd say down at that end, let's say that's 0 in terms of anxiety or stress, it's a 0. And then all the way to the right-hand side where the guy's waving there, that's like 10. That's really anxious, very stressful, okay? And I would say to you, okay, when you're on the line here, I'd like you to show me how you feel about eating lunch in the cafeteria at school. If you have no problems with that, you go all the way to the left. If you have some problems with that, you might stand in the middle, which is like a 5, or you might go all the way to the end if it's stressful for you. I might say to you, okay, how do you feel about stopping the principal in the hallway and asking him a question about something? Again, you might move up and down the line. You'd all physically move to a spot that's comfortable for you. I could say to you, how do you feel about swimming in the ocean at a beach resort? How do you feel about swimming in the ocean at a beach resort? So you folks would find a spot that's comfortable for you. Might be a 0, no problem, you love it. Might be a 10. Then I could say, well, how do you feel about swimming in the ocean 2 kilometers offshore, jumping off a boat, swim? How does that feel? And you'd move up and down the line. As we interact in this activity, what I would want to reinforce or enforce with you is that I'm listening to you and I can see you. I hear you. Wherever you are on that spectrum is legitimate for you. It's rational for you. That's where you belong. So I through my body language and my voice and my actions, I let you know that I'm listening. I acknowledge that that's a spot that I hear you, and that's your spot. And then I validate your feelings and say, hey, if I knew someone who'd been bitten by a shark, and I would feel a little anxious about going in the water too. or whatever that person's situation is along the line, I validate that. In other words, I believe them. I can't write the test today because I feel like throwing up. Well, if this is an anxious kid, I believe them. I can't go to the co-op placement today because when I was there yesterday, I did throw up. So I listen, I acknowledge, and I validate, and I validate their feelings about that situation. I can't make a presentation in class. It's too, I just hate it. So my first reaction, our first reaction, I think you would agree, is to listen to the person, acknowledge that you've heard them, and then validate that their feelings are real. If we do nothing else, folks, if we just laugh, then we're well on our way. And a lot of teachers do this naturally. A lot of teachers, this is part of who they are. It's part of their makeup, and you didn't have to tell them this. They do this, and they didn't even realize there was a model about it. Okay. Now, again, I'm sticking to some foundational things here, but it's important. So what I'm talking about here with the stages of change is that we're looking at a situation now where kids are preparing to change their behavior in terms of how they interact at school in relation to their anxious thoughts, their anxious behavior, and their stress. So what I'm suggesting is, oh, you can see my mouse, that a person is here, okay, preparing to change. They're ready. They're saying, I think I can do this. I need your help. If a student is in the first stage, in other words, I don't have a problem with anxiety. I like being at home and I like working online. I don't have a problem. Well, then we have to we have to validate, okay, listen, acknowledge, okay. If they don't think they have a problem, they don't have one. As far as they're concerned, you can't push them on stuff if they're not ready. In stage 2, they think they might have a problem, but they don't think they can do anything about it. It's too much effort. But stage 3 is when they say, and I'm going to jump here, I have anxiety. So when I'm working with kids, I do not bring up the topic of anxiety. I'm just working with them. And they may come right out and say it, I have anxiety. In a written assignment, that is not asking them about anything to do with anxiety, they will come out and say something in their assignment about, I couldn't go to the job interview because I'm too anxious. Or I wasn't able to work in the group because I have anxiety working with other people. They'll say it in an assignment. I've seen it in online discussion posts. I've seen it in blog posts. So it is incredibly rare in my experience, although I've worked with kids who are in group therapy. We did this for 6 years. These kids were under the care of a therapist. But most kids I work with now, they don't have any formal diagnosis. It's very rare. Okay, that's just my opinion and my experience. I don't have evidence on that. But if we look at the research, they'll tell you that there's not enough therapists to go around, and most of the kids who have anxiety do not get any help. There's no professional help for them. And part of the problem is they're still in stage 1 or 2. They're still in stage 1 or 2. And part of this model, the stages of change model by Prochaska, is that you want stage relevant intervention. So if the kid doesn't think they have anxiety, then you don't push anxiety on them. You work on other things with them, building a relationship with them, building trust. If they're contemplating here, you're still working on the relationship, building trust, showing them that there's ways you can do this, there's other people doing this, and you're trying to convince them gently that they're ready to roll. And then when they get to stage 3, then they're ready to look at the resource and start working with you on it. So when they finally say I have anxiety, I will say to them, would you like to learn how to manage anxiety? And so I ask their permission. If they say yes, then I substitute the anxiety material into the course. If they say no, if no thanks, I just return to the contemplative stage. Just keep working with them as a normal teacher would, being listen, acknowledge, validate, being a good teacher, doing proper assessment, good feedback, and hopefully at some point, if the question comes up, if this comes up, then I'll ask them again, but only once they've said that. So what I do then, these are the courses I teach, 3C, 4C, 4E, HHD 3.0, and co-op. So depending on the student, I'll substitute the anxiety resource right into one of these courses. So all these courses for me are e-learning courses. They're online courses. I do the anxiety part in a blended format. In other words, I always want to meet with them from time to time if they're doing any anxiety resource material with me. So I might take just Unit 3 out of one of these courses and put in the anxiety resource. For co-op, I will substitute, there's only 4 units in the online co-op course. I'll do the Unit 1 pre-placement activities, and then the Unit 2, 3, and 4 are all anxiety resources. If a kid's working with me really closely, coming in regularly, and is really into exploring this topic, then I could give this whole credit, and we do nothing but activities and assignments related to him or her learning about how to manage their anxiety. Now, I show this slide because it's got the Anxiety BC logo on it. So Anxiety BC is my go-to resource, Anxiety BC. Everything I'll be showing you in a minute, I get from the Anxiety BC website. So it's evidence-based, free, available 24/7. So even my resource that I've developed links back to Anxiety BC, because I don't want the student to simply think resources about anxiety are only available from a teacher in an online course. I want them to know that once the course is over, they can still go to Anxiety BC themselves, and their parents can, and they can keep working on things they want to and learn more as life goes on. And this is important because, if I can jump back, if you'll bear with me, I may go through a whole course and the person never gets to this section. Okay, I've got one fella now. He's just getting to this after 3 years. 3 years, folks. He's now 20, so he's out of high school, and he's reaching out yesterday, reaching out. So there's nothing I could do, even with professional help. We had a professional. We couldn't get the guy into this section. Now he's thinking, yeah. So as they grow up, mature, they'll eventually get to this preparation stage and want some help. So by building into the course a resource that is always available for them, even if they're in or out of school, is a good thing. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is show you some screenshots. I'm going to walk you through the resource. But before I do that, why don't we take a minute and just see if anybody has any questions about what you've seen so far. So if you want to if you got a question or a comment or something you want to say, just click your mic and go ahead while I set up the next screen. So if you have a question, just let me know. Okay, so if you do have a question throughout the presentation, just turn your mic on and let me know. So I'm going to show you this course. I've got it in our in D2L, in our e-learning system. Okay. Now, for those people familiar with D2L or teaching with online courses, you can customize this whole screen here. So that's what I do. So I created an empty shell in D2L, and then I created content for it. So let's just look through some of the content. So I've got it set up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units, and then a final project page. So it's just a matter of the student surfing through the material. And you can see at the bottom here, copyright 20, Anxiety BC. So I'm not taking any credit for creating this. This is beautiful material, and it's well presented, and it's available on their website. I go to Anxiety BC. I go into the Youth tab. Here are the same topics: Anxiety 101, Facing Fears, Thinking Right, How to Chill. So if I go back to my course and I go to my content, here's the same units: Anxiety 101, Facing Fears, Thinking Right, How to Chill. Okay, so this is a wonderful website. You can certainly, you don't need to do anything with me or use my e-learning course, but I've taken this material and put it into an e-learning course so that I can chunk it, so that I can monitor a student's progress, keep track of how much time they spent reading something. I can then assess it, evaluate it, and keep track of what they're doing. Whereas if I go in through here, it's a picture of a bedroom. This is appropriate because often one of the behaviors associated with anxious teens is they'll stop going to school, and then they'll spend more time just in their room. So there it is. See how this is a beautiful website, and I essentially do the same thing. I built it into my course here. So how I use it is, for each unit, I just open one unit at a time. So just Anxiety 101, and the student will work their way through it. And throughout my course, I will build in links back to Anxiety BC. So here's an example where it says start a quiz, and this literally takes you to the Anxiety BC website, and you do the quiz here. I purposely did this to start to train kids and their families to find this resource, to access this resource when school is over or the summer's on.
Hey Bernie, sorry to interrupt. It's Tasha.
Yep. Sure,
I just
go ahead,
wondered
Tasha.
if you get feedback. Do you get any feedback from students that they do, pursue the resource and future and later on and things like that?
No, I don't have any to be honest with you, I don't have a long-term study on that. It's worth doing. I'm considering it. It's a lot of work just to do the here and now with the student, and then to track them later, which would be valuable, and it's definitely something that's on my mind and in the works, requires, you have to do a formal research. I would have to do formal research on that. That's a big job, but I definitely, I'm looking to partner with a university or some grad students to do that.
Oh, that'd be a great idea.
Yeah, I have had one fella, he's about 22 now, and I first met him when he was 16. He's gone through this material for me as a more mature fella. He thinks it's fantastic. And he's come a long ways. So, and I'm not taking any credit for this particular resource doing it. This helped him, but he also had a professional therapist working with him when he was a student. But once he became an adult, he goes into adult mental health, and you're at the end of the line again. So once he left, once he became 18, that was it. He had no more therapist. His family has no money. So it's not like he can afford to see a therapist. He's doing really well, has a job, has a girlfriend, and he's, doing well. He's gone through this and thought it was wonderful, and that's a success story. The fellow I was mentioning earlier, who I've been working with for another fellow a few years, he's just hopefully going to get onto this year, but it's tough. The good news is all this material is based on cognitive behavior therapy, and there's lots of evidence to support that technique is very effective. And I don't mean to make it sound therapeutic or psychological or psychiatric or going beyond my level of professional teacher, but teaching someone to question their thoughts is not a mystery or a magical piece or dangerous or anything. If the kid is worried about failing a test, you should say, well, the same technique a therapist would use, a teacher can use. Why are you worried about that? What makes you think you're going to fail the test? And get them to question his thoughts. So anyway, good question, and definitely we're working towards that. At the end of each section, I have tasks, and so it's very a lot of thought went into each one of these tasks. So, for example, this talks about how your body protects and body reactions in standard process or in the therapy I observed over 6 years, and in all the literature. When people start talking about managing anxiety using cognitive behavior therapy, one of the first things you do is you get people to think about how their body reacts, and that's important so that they learn to recognize, oh, I'm having an anxious situation here, and instead of being fearful, be fascinated and say, okay, interesting. I'm walking down the hallway to the cafeteria, and my heart's beating. Wonder what that is. Well, that's anxiety. And then you teach them some strategies, and I try to get them to be fascinated rather than fearful. So that's a couple activities we have them do. They put it in a Dropbox. This is an important one about recognizing when you are anxious and what you're supposed to look at, and the three things. What are 3 things to focus on? And they are your behavior. So if you're walking to school and all of a sudden you feel like you're going to throw up, well, you turn around and go home. And your behavior there is, well, hey, I'm going home, but I'm supposed to be going to school today because there's an assembly today, and the assembly is this magician, and everybody's excited. It's going to be fun, but for some reason, I don't want to go in there. So to be aware of my behavior. Then what are my thoughts? Well, what are my thoughts? It's hard for a kid to come up with it, but it might be, well, I don't think I have any friends. I won't know where to sit. Someone will laugh at me. I got a haircut yesterday. It looks stupid. Who knows what his thoughts are? And then his feelings are, he feels like he's going to throw up. So you teach kids to pay attention to those things, and then, as I said earlier, you want them to be fascinated rather than fearful. Then I have them do a little quiz. I'm very clear to them up front that we're not evaluating. This is assessment. This is assessment. It's not a formative thing. This is formative. It's not an evaluation, it's assessment. And once they've done this, I meet with them. So it's not like they go through it, I give them some online feedback, and then we go to Unit 2. No, I want them to come in, and I want to sit with them, and go through these things and make sure they understand it, they get it. Okay, once they've done that, then I open up Unit 2. And built into this course, and again, I get all this from Anxiety BC, are some really good videos of young people talking about their situation. Now, you can't hear it here, but you're welcome to go through this course or go to the Anxiety BC website, of course. But if you go through the course, you'll hear all these young people talking, and then it's all built in, the strategy and the technique for learning to manage your anxiety is built right into it and built right into the assessment. So it's what we're doing here, folks, is we're taking self-help strategies, and instead of saying to the kid, hey, here's a website, you and your family should look at this. It's hard enough just being a teenager. Then you're going to take an anxious teenager and say, you go figure this out? No. So as a professional, I'm saying, no, I'll look at that self-help strategy. I'm a good teacher. I'm going to put together experiences and online content and assessment and evaluation so that the kid understands it and learns it. So I'm taking self-help strategies and teaching the kid. So there's really good videos built right into this. And there are tasks as well here. So one of the tasks is to create what's called a fear hierarchy. So this is standard. If you did your own research on managing anxiety, legitimate sources are going to come up with at some point a person's going to develop a fear hierarchy. In other words, what makes you frightened? So for this example, doing a presentation in class is like high. It's a 9 or a 10. Going to the mall on Saturday, 8. Ordering food at a restaurant, etc. Now, when I'm working with a kid, I stick all these things, usually just stick having to do with going to school, performing well as a student, going to extracurricular activities, anything to do with school. Now, I can't stop the kid if he says, going to the mall is really tough for me. If he says that, well, I'll put it down. Okay? Now, we want to do this because when we start practicing, we work on the low-level ones here. Okay, so a fear hierarchy is important. And then we come up with what's called a fear ladder as well. And I built in a little link right back to the content. So what's a fear ladder? It's just taking whatever your one of your fear hierarchies. So this person's goal, or one of the things they were found difficult, was to make a new friend. And to make a new friend, you break that down into small or manageable steps. That's how you do it. So let's say eating food in the cafeteria right here. This is a problem for a lot of kids. So to make a fear ladder for that, we might say, okay, well today, we're eating lunch in the resource room, which is what we've been doing for 2 years. But you've set a goal, you want to try and eat in the cafeteria. So today, we're just going to talk about eating in the cafeteria. So we eat our food in the resource room, and we just talk about it. We might do that for a couple days. And then the next step might be, we're going to finish our meal here in the resource room, then we're going to walk down towards the cafeteria and walk by the cafeteria. And then when it's appropriate, we might eat our meal in the resource room, walk down to the cafeteria, go into the cafeteria, and out the other door. Now you may think this is crazy, but that's exactly what you have to do. Practice, 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 practice. Practice makes permanent. You have to practice this with them. So with one of my students who was returning to the traditional high school from the alternative school for second semester, I met her there on a Friday before the second semester started. We met at 3:30, and we practiced walking to the science room. How many steps? We went through the door. Where are we going to sit? And we practiced that. Now, it may sound goofy, but that's what you have to do. So that's why you want to learn about fear ladders. Then I got a little quiz here. And finally, for today, we're only going to look at this this last unit here, because this is important. And some people overreact and think, oh, you can't start getting kids to think right. So let's take a look at a common problem with kids is thinking traps. Now, has anybody? Can I ask you a question? Have you guys heard about thinking traps, or can you share with me any material or support or any direction you've been given so far in terms of working with kids who have anxiety or mental health? I guess I'm going to just stick with anxiety for now. It is the #1 issue here. Does anybody have a thought? First of all, are you aware of thinking traps? And then can you share anything to do with some of the resources you're aware of that your school uses or you've been suggested for you to use? Anything from you? Jocelyn?
Bernie, you are our resource. We haven't really heard of thinking traps, and we don't really have any resources to deal with anxiety as of yet. That's why we're so interested in offering this material to the students.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, wonderful. It's wonderful that you're interested. Do you think is that partly because you're an alternative school? Like, does the regular high school have more resources, or what are your thoughts on that?
You know what? I don't really know what they have at the high schools. We don't think they do. Sharon is here. I don't know if you remember when we were in the that open chat session at the Valhalla. You and Sharon were sharing, and she has DBT training.
Yep.
But no thinking traps. But no thinking traps, she said.
Okay.
Yeah, this is new to me too, Bernie. I don't have any experience in this stuff.
Okay. Well, then I think we're just together learning through it. Thinking traps are built into the Anxiety BC course website, and it was built into the therapy sessions when I worked with a couple of therapists. It was part of it. I find it useful when a student says something like, I can't go to I'm dropping that course because it's all group work. And the student's been to the class twice, and they're making a statement like that. Well, that's like all or nothing. It's going to be, no, that's not all or nothing. That person's like fortune telling, believing it's going to be the same. Like she said, it's going to be group work. It's going to be just like it was before. She was predicting the future. She was overgeneralizing. And yeah. And it was important for her to identify, oh yeah, one of my thinking traps is I think bad things are going to happen all the time. And I'm a fortune teller. Where's the fortune teller? I'm just looking for it here. Fortune telling. She thinks she can predict the future. Of course she can't. So it's useful. I find it useful. Thinking traps. Okay. Now, these thinking right tools, so this really deserves a lot more to it, but I'm going to just touch on them just briefly. So for most of us, we may only be able to listen, acknowledge, and validate the student and help them get to class, get into the cafeteria, and just push through it. Like if you use the Nike slogan, just do it, that's pretty good. just do it. If the kid was able to go into the cafeteria 10 days in a row, it's likely he's going to go 11. If the kid makes it to day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, you've got it beat. Or you don't have it beat, but you've done really well. If as August ends and September begins, if the kid makes it to day 1 of school, that's wonderful. And if we can support the kid to physically go, that's fantastic. So that's an exposure. We're not doing anything to do with their thoughts or how they're feeling. We're validating their feelings and acknowledging them, but we're not trying to have them question what they're thinking. Now, for me, because I'm in an alternative setting, I have some flexibility. So we can work on some of these things about how they're thinking. So I get these ones from a book called My Anxious Mind. They're really simple and easy. So if you'll permit me, let's look at this one here.
Bernie, can
Yeah.
I just ask you a question?
Yep.
Is there a way that our students in alt ed or in custody facilities can access this course without us having to, like, is there a way for us to have our own, like, access to this course so we can sign some of our students up and then we can get notifications, mark it, and we can print stuff out for those that are in, say, custody facilities who can't be registered online?
Yeah.
There is, eh? Okay.
Totally. So before we end today, we've got steps to take on that.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you.
So here's one tool that may be the only one you ever really need, but there's other ones that are, the other 3 are useful too. So let's say, here's the kid's statement here. I'm a terrible student and I'll fail this class. This is not unusual. I'm terrible at math. I'm going to fail it. I hate it. And remember my description of listen, acknowledge, validate, and the rope on the floor, and everybody finds their position on the rope. Well, if the kid is over at the 8 zone saying, I hate math, I'm going to fail, well, then you have to acknowledge, okay, well, that's how we feel. So I'm not going to judge him or her on that. That's the way they feel. But what you start to do is, well, what's the evidence for that? What's the evidence that you're going to fail? Well, in this example, it says, I did fail my first quarter final, and I received tutoring every week. That's evidence that, yeah, I guess I might be bad. But what's the evidence against? Well, I passed the second quarter final and got 93%. My tutor tells me I know the material well. Tutoring doesn't mean I'm a bad student. Tutoring helps me understand math and make it easier. So when a student makes one of these kind of statements, it's often difficult for them to come up with evidence against because they have thinking traps. They think that things are going to not work out. They're mind readers. They think people don't like them. And, they see things black and white. I'll either pass or I'll fail. I'll either graduate, go to university, become a millionaire, or I'm going to live on the street. Like, they have these thinking traps. So this one is useful. When we take kids in this other summer program I do, where we're out in the forest, we're out in the forest, so we might say, okay, what's on your mind? And one kid will say, well, bears, getting attacked by a bear. And I'll say, good one, excellent. And you write that down. Bear attack, that's good. Let's be fascinated, not fearful. Then I'll say, well, what's the evidence of bear attacks? Jimmy, get on the computer. Look up bear attacks. Well, guess what? There's not too many bear attacks. And you can put the evidence for and against such a thing. So evidence for, well, there occasionally are bear attack. And then when you look at the evidence against, they only happen in certain areas, not certain areas, but certain conditions exist. The person was alone, they startled the bear. If you were wandering through the forest as a group, making noise, it's likely they're just going to run off. So evidence for and against is a good one. for countering how kids think about things about school. The teacher doesn't like me. I don't have any friends in that class. Like all these kind of things you can look at the evidence for and against. Another one that we use is what's called responsibility piece. In other words, if there's a negative situation that happened, our group failed, we only got 72% on our group project. Well, it's you and 3 others who are part of the group. It's not all your fault that you don't like the mark. The mark wasn't perhaps as high as what you were expecting. I mean, you can't be responsible for the other 3. It takes more than one person to create a situation. So that's a good one. Even better is this one here. In other words, this one simply says this: listen, here's the event. I told Adam I love homework. Now the person's thinking, I can't believe I said that. He must think I'm a geek. I'll never get a boyfriend now. Now, as a teacher, we're not going to run into this kind of thing where the person's, we may not run into it anyway. I haven't, but perhaps you folks have, where they're telling you a personal story because they something to do at school here in terms of homework. But in this example, you just use the time machine. In other words, what is this going to mean later on? In 10 years, it's going to be nothing. We mean nothing to you. Right now, it's important, but in an hour, in a day, in a week, in a month, your anxiety goes down. And this is the truth, okay? This is the evidence. Anxiety always goes down at some point. Now, I know there's general anxiety disorder where a student is worrying about all kinds of things all the time. True enough. But in any situation, it always at some point goes down. Always. Even a panic attack peaks in about 6 minutes. That's the evidence. I'm quoting that from Anxiety BC. So I can say to a student, look, you didn't do well on that test. They may have failed the test. That's the fact. You failed it. But how bad is it? How important is that test going to mean in a month? In 2 months? I mean, it's not going to mean much in 2 years. So why not consider just exhaling and not worrying too much about that one? It's going to go away. So that's the purpose of Time Machine. And then the final one is called Confidence Booster. And this is another sort of standard one of saying you can do this, you've done this before, you're a good student. So I know many of you probably do this already automatically. You remind students of the good work they do, you encourage them, and you help them push through it. Teachers do this all the time. So I'm constantly doing it at the alternative school. Prior to an exam, I will make it clear to the student, all the work you've done so far has been good. This exam is just a snapshot today. If for some reason you draw a blank or it doesn't go well, there's no way we're going to count it. We're going to redo the exam, do another question, do another assignment. You are a good student. And it helps. If you take away that, minimize those anxious thoughts they have about failure and being judged and all that, they perform better. Just like the little girl who's singing the national anthem. As soon as the anxiety is there, they know through research that the frontal lobes of your brain shut down. There's no rational thought going on anymore. It's really tough. So you can use a confidence booster. You know deep down all these kids are absolutely beautiful and wonderful. You know they have incredible potential and talent. They forget it. They do not see their strengths. If you look at one of those thinking traps, the negative filter, they just see all the negative things. They could have do a wonderful presentation to the class, and it's just incredible. And then just at the end, they knock over something, and they think, oh, what a terrible present. They forget all the goodness. They forget all the wonderful cheering that happened or comments people made. They just think of the negative. So confidence booster is a good one. Okay, now I built in as well thinking traps or thinking right tools from Anxiety BC, because I can't question them. I do not question how good they are. I just find these ones are tougher to teach. These 4 are the ones we used in the group therapy, because they were pretty easy for kids to grasp and very easy for us to apply. Okay, now the last 2 chapter or units, these fit into a health course, any course you want. There's nothing cognitive behavior therapy about this at all. How to chill. It's standard. It's, acknowledge and recognize that helping calm breathing is effective. Muscle relaxation is good. Visualizations is good. Mindfulness, you could do a whole thing on just mindfulness, and it would be worthy and worthwhile to do. I don't think it's sufficient, but it's worthy of doing. It's wonderful. When we do our experiential program in the summer for 2 weeks, mindfulness is important, because it's so when you walk through the forest and you can hear the leaves crunching underneath your feet, and you hear the rapids flowing just over near the river, and you're in the here and now, then your mind is not ruminating and worrying about things. You're not feeling anxious. You're so connected to the here and now that it's a healthy experience. Lots of evidence on getting kids outdoors, right? That's not part of Anxiety BC's website. That's just outdoor education, the value of being outside, and mindfulness kicks in. So these are all standard things. There's nothing new here. Built into everything is even got the script, and you can hear the person talking how to do it. Okay, and then healthy habits. This is, again, standard physical education stuff about alcohol and drugs. They do make the case, obviously, that alcohol and drugs is not good for anxious teenagers. So, a lot of research on that. They think that kids will start using marijuana, smoke pot, because it alleviates their anxiety, but it's not good. It's bad news. I'm not an expert on this, so I will not pretend to be, but I know that it's just when they get high, what they're doing is avoiding their thoughts. It's not good. Same thing when they get drunk. They're just avoiding their thoughts, and it's their thoughts, their irrational thoughts, that are causing trouble here. So, alcohol and drugs are bad news. Being active, wonderful. So again, with the summer program we do, we go till 10 o'clock at night. We keep the kids moving. We do yoga from like 9:30 to 10, or 10, 9:15 to 10. We're doing yoga late at night. All kinds of physiological reasons why we know being active is good. Eating right, same thing. And making sleep count. The facts, I think it's in here that it tells you, yeah, youth needs 9 to 9.5 hours of sleep. Holy jeepers. Okay. So that's the anxiety course, and I've got tasks built into here too.
Bernie, would a student have to move through every single, like if they moved through Anxiety 101, Facing Your Fears, all of that, and did all of the tasks, would that cover enough curriculum to grant an HHD credit?
For me it does.
For you.
Okay. Here's the thing. In my experience with the kids in group therapy, so when I first started working with the kids, like being a volunteer in the group, doing the experiential activities, I soon realized that holy jumping, These kids are 24/7 anxious. This isn't like 75-minute geography class. No. It's with them all the time for the ones who had serious issues. It takes a lot of courage to face your fears. So if their homework was to go to the mall on a Saturday, that's a big deal. Now they have to write about it, and there were online discussions. So in the group therapy we did, now it was over 20 weeks and 2 hours every Tuesday night, like from 3:30 to 5:30. All high schools in the city sent kids to this. It was easy for me to grant them a credit on that. That was easy. Now we don't do the group therapy, and I work with them individually, and if they're really engaged, like they're really working on it, then I grant them a credit. Now I don't just do this material. I do this, then I have them read a book I have called Success for Teens. I have them write a blog about the book, and we practice exposure. So I can't do this with every kid, but some kids. So the one guy, to go to Canada College, we had to drive to Canada College, walk through the hallway, and as he's walking, he's monitoring how anxious he is. You know, I'm a 4 right now. Okay, we came around the corner. There's some students 15 meters away. He says, as soon as I get there, I know it's gonna go up. And sure enough, as we walked by and then went around the corner. So to me, and then him reflecting and blogging about that all counts. So if they just go through these 5 units, no, that's not enough. But I have them do all kinds of other stuff. That's relevant to them. So the one book I use, Success for Teens, is really good. See if I can do this. Let's see if we can get funky cool here. 1 second. Can you see my, oops, no, can't hear. I'll turn the webcam on for a second. Success for Teens. See that? So Google those guys, and they'll send you free books from the States. And then what I do is I have the kid read each chapter, and after each chapter, I have them blog about it.
Bernie, sorry, what was that website where they send you free books?
It's called Success for Teens, and the website is just go success.com. Success.com. Let's see if I can find it here. Hold on. See if I can get it. See if I can find it here for you. Yeah, this is it. Right here. SuccessFoundation.org. They've got all kinds of stuff. Free books, facilitator's guide. And I don't want to give you the impression that I'm going to overload you with all kinds of resources. But hey, that book was nice and easy for me to use. I give them a copy. I have them read it, and then I have them blog about it. Okay? Is that helpful?
Super helpful, thank you.
Yeah, I got that from a lady named Heather Sampson at Project Dare. So she's been using this online resource for a couple of years, and whenever I visit her, she has all kinds of cool stuff. So she shared this book with me, and right away I called them. They sent me 25 copies of the book for nothing, and I give the kid a book, and then each chapter is standard self-improvement things that applies to anybody. Okay, so that augments it augments the course. Now, with that said, so for a lot of kids, I'll get them to do the Success for Teens. Okay. Now, another kid, he was going into the military, so I ordered this book, and I said, how about you read this book and blog about that? So it's like a question of finding what's relevant for the student. Okay. I'm going to go back to here. So we just toured the course, and you're welcome to go to this website. That's our e-learning website, and use that username and that password. And you're welcome to tour around in it as much as you like. So it's just npsc.elearningontario.ca. Now, from that course, the final output, the final product, just in our closing minutes here, this is what I have the kids do, okay? I want them to develop a fear hierarchy. In other words, what are the things they're afraid of, from not very afraid to very afraid. Then I want them to take one of those and break it into a smaller situation. Break it into smaller steps. I want them to be aware of their own physical reactions to stress. So then I want them to practice progressive muscle relaxation. Nothing fancy about that. That's standard. Practice visualization. That's standard kind of stuff. I want them to differentiate between a rational and an irrational fear in a given situation. So, for example, walking through the forest at night on a night hike, there is some rational fear there about a bear or a wolf. That's fine. Singing in front of 35,000 people at an NBA game with 2 million people watching, that's irrational. It's understandable you'd be anxious there, okay? The irrational fear would be something like, I'm going to fail this test, I'm going to fail the course, I won't graduate, I won't get a good job, I'm going to live on the street, I'm going to die poor. That's irrational. Walking down the hallway, seeing 3 kids talking and thinking to yourself, they don't like me, they're laughing at me. That's irrational. Okay, so that's important. Differentiate between cognitive distortions. So just those thinking traps. So I do have them come up with a couple thinking traps. They may label them put their own label on it, call it something other than black and white thinking. They may say, I'm a negative ninny. I always think negative things. Okay. And then another common one with the teenagers is mind reading. They think they know what the teacher thinks. They think they know what Jimmy thinks. You can't read that person's mind. You have no idea. Then I have them select a proper calm mind tool for given situations. So I just teach them those 4: evidence for and against, responsibility pizza, time machine, and confidence booster. And just have them, apply one of those in terms of, okay, you're going to go in to the vice principal's office and you're going to ask him if he could change the fundraising activity from one day to the next. What calm mind tool do you want to use? Well, evidence for or against. Yeah, what are you thinking? Well, I think he's going to yell at me. Well, then you just have them think that through. Okay, so that's what we're doing there. Tolerate a user-defined level of stress without leaving the situation. So you never want to put someone in an uncomfortable situation, so you let them define it themselves. So do it might be in terms of a class presentation. Maybe that's it. Okay, that's your goal. Make a class presentation. Obviously, we're not going to push them beyond their level. Okay, so next steps. What can we do next? Well, option 1 is you tour through the course content, request a personal login. You can just email me or and say, Bernie, yeah, give me my own, and I'll go through it myself. I would recommend, complete tasks in Unit 1, 2, 3 with Bernie's help. So you don't make this a summer project. You don't make this a labor-intensive thing. You go through it, and together I just help you do them, so you're not spending all kinds of time. But I want you to do them. Request your own copy of the course. I'll give you a copy for D2L. You can have your own and do whatever you want with it. Then customize the course with Bernie's support. In other words, I would be glad to help you once I give you a copy. If you need some help changing it, like for example, in your English course, you may just put these few units into your English course. I'll show you how to do that. Option 2, commit to making this part of your annual learning plan. Request some PD funds from your association. I know OECTA gives us $300 a year I can get from my local union folks. You print full
Bernie, sorry to interrupt, but just before I forget, just talking about PD funds, our principal wanted to know if you could give us like a cost of having you come up here and do some PD with some other teachers.
I'd love to do it.
That's for next year, but if you could give us, or maybe email me a price, maybe, and I could send it to him.
Whatever it costs to get there. And put me up for the night. Pay my expenses. There's no fee.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'd love to do it.
Okay, I'll talk to you more about that after talking to the principal.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, as I said here, I put attend a 2-day workshop because I believe to do it right, you want to not only cover the material, but you want to do some experiential activities, because I am, believe it or not, at the fundamental level, experiential teacher. Okay, thank you so much. I've gone a few minutes over. There's my email address. I'm available in the summer. Ta-da! If you're passing through North Bay, you will want to go sailing on Lake Nipissing. So you're invited to come sailing on Lake Nipissing. We can make it a metaphorical anxiety experiment. And there's my summer cell number too. Call me anytime in the summer.
Ernie, that's amazing.
And the last week of July and the first week of August, I'll be doing a 2-week program. So I'm going to busy train. Otherwise, I'm pretty flexible.